I think we are live. Let's start.
Are we audible?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Just a little bit of technical issues over here. Just give me 2 minutes.
And guys, let's mute ourselves when one person is speaking so that there is no echo.
All right. So let's begin. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another one of RLA's live discussions. Today, we have with us Mandeep and Anmol as our panelists who will be discussing the fundamentals of maritime domain and will try to contextualize them in terms of international relations. For today's discussion on South China Sea dispute. The South China Sea extends from the Strait of Malacca in the southwest to the Strait of Taiwan in the northwest. Over 500 million people in China, Taiwan, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, Indonesia, Singapore, Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam live within 100 miles of its coastline. The Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong's perceptive essay in the latest issue of Foreign Affairs convincingly spells out the dilemma that confronts Singapore and indeed the rest of us in the Indo Pacific as the two most consequential powers of the world. The US, which Prime Minister Lee calls the resident power, and China, which he says is the reality on the doorstep, are engaged in the fundamental transformation of their relationship. Almost nobody any longer thinks that China will conform to the US worldview or that China's rise from here on will be unchallenged. Chinese military postures, on the other hand, give cause for concern ever since they unilaterally put forward the Nine Dash Line in 2009 to declare the South China Sea as territorial waters. Their territorial claim itself is insubstantial, neither treaty based nor legally sound. They act in ways that are neither benign or helpful for long term peace and stability. In the first half of 2020 alone, Chinese naval or militia forces have rammed a Vietnamese fishing boat, buzzed a Philippines naval vessel, and harassed a Malaysian oil drilling operation, all within their respective exclusive economic zones. Since 2015, they have built a runway and underground storage facilities on the Subi Reef and Thitu Island, as well as radar sites and missile shelters on Fairy Cross Reef and Mischief Reef. They conducted ballistic missile tests in the South China Sea in June 2019 and continue to enhance patrols to enhance and enforce area denial for others. Accommodation may have worked thus far, but regional prosperity has come at a mounting cost in geostrategic terms. The South China Sea is effectively militarized. With this, we come to the first part of our discussion, with the basics of maritime security and India's significance in the South China Sea. Can one claim that there is a significant lack of awareness on maritime power or the relevance that it's been given in academic circles and otherwise? Do you think that some myths and beliefs that surround maritime power need to be tackled? Because so much has been talked about South China Sea, yet there's very little known about how important it is to countries, even India. Mandeep, would you like to comment on this?
Okay, sure, Sheetal, thank you. I guess you make a very important point that before one dwells into the nuances of South China Sea and its dispute, it's very crucial to get our fundamentals clear. For example, in our intellectual circles or in newspapers, when we hear the word or when we read the word geopolitics, it is very important to understand that what is geopolitics, what are the implications of these words, and most importantly, that terms like geopolitics cannot be interchanged or replaced with other terms like geoeconomics or geostrategy. There are various overlapping differences between these terms. So coming back to my point, when we talk about geopolitics, we must realize that we are just not talking about the territory of a nation state. We are also talking about the maritime boundaries of a nation state. For example, technically one can say that there are at least two Indias if we compare both the continental and the maritime territorial expanse. So that is one thing that needs to be understood. Second, there is another important thing which makes maritime domain a little bit more complicated. This can be understood by these two terms, capacity and capability. Now, the difference between these two terms is that India has capacity to do something and India has a capability to do something. When we are talking about capacity, we are talking about its natural resources, its material resources, the strengths India have developed, and which are natural in nature, most importantly. When we are talking about capability, it can be, say, acquiring a naval base or a missile or testing a missile. Those are the capabilities. So there is an important difference between these terms. So now, when we in the discussion talk about South China Sea, at least we must make sure that in the future as well as now, we know our maps. We know when we are talking about India-China standoff, what do we mean? We simply do not mean territorial borders. We mean the sea also. And same goes for South China Sea. So I guess that's important to know.
Right, very well, Mandeep. Speaking of that, there's one way of looking at the importance of any nation's maritime capability is to realize that it has a maritime boundary as well, just like the territorial boundary and the subsequent challenges that come with it. However, it is still easier to identify the stakeholders and challenges that pertain to the territory of a nation. Can either one of you do the same for the maritime boundary of any country, even India? Anmol or Mandeep, am I audible?
I guess Anmol was speaking, but her mic was mute. So should I answer this or?
Sorry. No, no, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Sheetal, I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
So I'm saying I can light up the issue in this regard. Thank you, Sheetal. Firstly, so when it comes to the internal boundaries of the stakeholder importance and the boundaries, it's very important because stakeholders hold a very important framework in the internal territories of the region when in the form of fishery communities, mine, mine, maritime security issues and safety issues. When it comes to these issues, stakeholders hold a very important role, and India has also and when it comes to the South China issue, the South China Sea is not hegemony of the China. It's a common good that each nation holds its right or can have access to, because it's a common good. So in that regard, even India has a 200. If we talk about in the regional context, India, the neighboring countries also had a stake in it, as over the year 200 tons of 200 billion dollars business all every year India does with the South China Sea in this regard. In addition to this, not this, it has also has a people and students that are working in different parts of the region in the neighboring countries, whether it's Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia. Uh, so it has a have a importance in this region that we need to highlight. Okay. In the form of, especially in the form of COVID situation that we have recently, because after COVID, how much time we will take to recover from this issue, or economical stability in the region is very important, and for that we need to depend upon each other to strong ties and strong hold to each other, right? So that's why that's how I can explain that's how we can explain this whole issue in a more concise and political sense, I could say.
Right. Thank you so much, Anmol. With this, we go to the second part of our discussion on South China dispute, Nine Dash Line and Four Shah Islands. So this question is to Mandeep. What do you think is the root cause of South China Sea? Why do you think it's always China versus all? Why does it have to be maritime? Why does it have to have maritime border disputes with five of its neighboring states? We know that in 2016, China lost an international arbitration to Philippines that nullified and rejected China's 9-9, undermining its claim in the South China Sea and its alleged historical rights. Would you like to comment on this?
Sure, it's a very interesting question, Sheetal, because I will answer this in two parts rather. First, we need to understand, for example, you in the beginning and the arbitration case which you just mentioned, and Anmol also very eloquently mentioned several examples about India and China and how this all is playing out. We must understand one thing, that we need not to look at these incidents in isolation. Number one. Second, we don't need to look at these incidents as sudden or they were not happening before. Oceans have been here since forever, so hence the disputes have been here since forever. So the important thing which many people tend to ignore is that there is a fundamental information gap or difference of perception between China and other nation states regarding maritime international law. Most of the
Right.
maritime international law that is present today in the international relations and the world is something called United Nations Convention on the Laws of Sea, that is UNCLOS, which China has ratified, India has signed and ratified. So most of the nation states work, trade, fight according to this piece of document. But problem comes that this document's origins are largely Europe based, or more specifically Roman based. So China has a problem here because China says that I'm part of Asia and we have our own culture, we have our own roots. So why do we follow something that is European, which is coming from out and being imposed on us? So this is the first part of the problem, a very crucial part, that there is a fundamental difference of perception in conceiving the international law itself. Now, the second part, which you just mentioned, the nine dash line, I don't have a map here, but the best way to put it is this, that there are certain islands, the four islands in the South China Sea, perhaps the most important, if I may say so, important, Spratly Island. And these islands, according to the UNCLOS, give certain kind of territorial sovereignty. Now, what I'm trying to say is that if there is an island figure here and a country claims that this is my island, so country's territory is also naturally extended. Its maritime territory is also extended. So the trade is extended, the military activities are extended. So nine dash line is just like semicircles and circles, tiny islands called islets, a series of islands, four islands, compensated by certain artificial islands.
Right.
Now, there are two problems with this. First, very simple problem that a country cannot do that. If an island is randomly lying there, you cannot claim its sovereignty. Second, you can construct artificial islands as much as you want to, but again, you cannot claim the sovereignty. So I guess these are some basic yardsticks to understand the conflict, a very basic perhaps. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mandeep. Would you like to add, Anmol?
Yes, surely. So, as Mandeep rightly says, the issue of nine dash line goes to a far back region and a longer issue which cannot be dealt in one or two lines. So, in the same issue, I want to talk about the implications of the nine dash line that it holds not to just China but as a whole to the Asian countries. So China hold its claim of the nine dash line as far as from the 1947. 1947 regarding the nine dash line with the formation of republics, China's People's Republic, formation of China's People Republic. Republic, and in that it says that people of the that it holds over 80% of the 80% of the South China Sea region, and and also claims the region of other neighboring countries, whether it's Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, or Taiwan, to say so, right? But in more recent activities, it says it's again go back to its 1947 claim on Nine Dash Line, and say, especially after the destruction of Vietnam ships in the South China Sea by the Chinese naval authorities. They destroyed the Vietnam ships in the South China Sea, and now they are again going back to the issue of the Nine Dash Line by saying that they have a claim over it, while in general terms, in more legal terms, they haven't defined the line or the right over it. If we go to the international laws of UNELCOS, which by which China is also bound, but they don't follow these lines. So these are the this is what we can say about the Nine Dash Line. But also one more thing that I want to add is that people usually have a idea that China has more inclination toward the Nine Dash Line because of its island and wartime regions, not just because of its water boundaries. So they have main interest in the islands and coral reefs rather than just the water boundaries of the South China Sea. This was the main issue basically in the Nine Dash Line.
Very well. Could either one of you elucidate for
Thank
our
you.
viewers the technicalities involved and the implications that arise in the South China Sea dispute?
Yes, Sheetal. So there have been numerous developments quite recently, actually, during this world pandemic, to say. So one important thing is that very recently China named, or we can say reclaimed or claimed 80, 80 islets and reefs, including 55 of those which are underwater. So, as Anmol mentioned, that this is just not about territory and sovereignty. Obviously, it is about material resources, trading, and natural resources that are associated with it. So, and one recent activity. Now, the in the beginning, like you mentioned, the problem here is that China trades the largest with Asian. Asian is the biggest trading partner of China right now. So, and then there is USA, which has been operating military naval ships in their activities called RFPOP, Right of Free Navigation. But Asian countries or countries involving in South China dispute have this unique dilemma that they are dependent upon trade, technology, or weapons on China, and for their security in South China Sea, they are dependent on the USA.
Right.
And the most important development here in this case, or the implication you asked, is that very recently, on July 13th, the Department of United States actually released a press release where they gave first time for their official stand on the South China Sea, where they mentioned the treaties like UNCLOS 60 and UNCLOS 121, which China violates, and
Right.
the various violations China does. Basically, USA is saying out it explicitly now at a diplomatic level, and followed by US statement, India has also joined the same suit. So these are the recent implications, and it seems that the zone will actually get more militarized with time, seeing on all the indications, and a lot of activity is already happening and is going to unfold.
Right. Right. Very well, Mandeep. How do you think that the South China Sea dispute is critical to the well-being and the security of the countries? We can take India's security at hand. And would you like to comment on this?
Mm, yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Mm, uh, in recent times, we are very clear that India and China has on view of this. If we talk about the security issues, even in the maritime region, is very important because with with the eye on the South China Sea, China is also eyeing it towards the Indian Ocean recently, with its activities in the southern region of the Indian Ocean, with the use of missiles and fishery and regular spotting of fisheries and fishery communities in the North region, in the Indian Ocean region by the Indian naval communities. Not only that the another issue that the country like India that hold political connections with most of the Asian countries. They are bullying. China is bullying those countries that which hold strong political and legal connections with the India and have a business with India. So it's also hampering India's economical interest in some way or the another. So if we need to prosper and to grow in the long run, we need to protect not only just our economical interests but the oceans, because most of the regions are connected and have the business with the oceans, right? So
Right.
that's the critical point when it comes to the ocean security, especially when you see that across the globe, and that constitute one third of the total business that globe over the globe we have conducted. So how strategically important for India to strong to hold on the oceans and its boundaries. Thank you, Sheetal.
Right. Thank you so much. So also there's one very important question that I think most people don't know about. Is that the four Shah Islands? Can anyone of you tell me about it? A little bit about the islands.
Yeah, I guess Sheeta, this is perhaps a very, very important question. And this happened right after the arbitration which you mentioned. That was arbitration between Philippines and China over 9-9. And in the international court, it was ruled against China. So it did not make sense. One can claim that or draw conjecture that it did not make sense for China to pursue the 9-9 anymore, since most of the countries were against it, and it was even in the international court, it could not stand the test of the time. So since 2016, if one finds the official statements of Chinese representatives and their activities tell us about this something called Fosha Islands, which is basically a group of four islands, which again includes Spratleys, Paracels, perhaps most important islands strategically, Ratas
Yeah.
and Macclesfield. So these four islands form this thing called Forsha Islands. The interesting thing about this is that China is sort of asking to demand a baseline on each island. In simple terms, each island will have its own sovereignty. Now, if each island has its own sovereignty of 12 nautical miles and more, and its own special economic zones and everything that comes, continental shelf, then one can say it won't be wrong to say that China will have sovereignty over all the waters of the South China Sea, all the activities, all the economic activities. So that is a very heavy claim, yet no one really talks about it, and we are still stuck on 9-9. Perhaps it's circulated more academically or whatever the reasons are.
Right, right. You know, there are still a lot of PhD students doing their theses on nine dash line, but most of them seem to not be aware of this term or development pertaining to South China Sea. This itself tells one about the lack of information and the institutionalized studies on maritime security in India. Mandeep, since you talked about there being a lack of awareness on maritime power in the beginning of today's discussion, would you like to explicate a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I guess even as an IR student, the problem I face is that we are not really taught maps. And if we are not taught maps, we are not aware of the territories. The kind of coverage South China Sea dispute gets, it's still very vague or abstract. We are talking about islands here, but if we don't know what significance those islands hold in terms of the area they cover, the activities that are permissible within the range limits, what cannot be done, what is legal, what is happening, are there any oil activities taking place, are there any scientific activities taking place that are perhaps dangerous. So the I guess one starting point is to read that is directly coming from China, to say if we want to sort of say move beyond 9-9 and find out what Forsha Islands it, it is better to read the statements that are directly coming from the nation state itself and understand what are the legal implications, what are the economic implications, and what are the military implications. Now, that is geopolitics. It just cannot be, simply a territory thing or a trade figure. So
Yeah.
one needs to understand the location of these four islands and how they are connected with other countries. And it's not just China. But China is doing four Shah Islands, and Japan has the claim over two of those islands,
Yeah.
Sparkly and Peninsul, in some other form. So it's quite complicated. So the I guess the thing is first to know the basics.
Right. Right. The South China Sea dispute remains unresolved due to several factors, but the biggest of them all is the fact that the dispute has a lot of stakeholders: China, Taiwan, Philippines, India, US, and so many more. And the history has been such that a conflict that involves more than three powerful countries as stakeholders somewhat remains unresolved for a long period of time. I think that's exactly what's happening to South China Sea as well. The geopolitical situation at this point is such that the US and China have been embroiled in the trade war since 2 years, with the relations turning worse in 2020 with the COVID-19 and US's consequent accusations towards China's undermining the information regarding the virus. Anmol, would you like to comment on the clashing
Right.
relationship that exists between US and China with respect to South China Sea, of course?
Yeah. Um, Yeah, actually, it's a very interesting thing to note down when it comes to the China and US relations, because basically, in general terms, US does not hold any claim over the South China Sea, but still it has
Right.
a control over the South China Sea and holds authority to pass a law or to have a decision-making power in the matter of the South China Sea. So in such situation, when it comes to the relationship between the China and US, we should note that the US act as a bearing between the between the neighboring countries of the China who have a dispute with China, basically, whether it's the Philippines, the Myanmar, Malaysia, Taiwan, and the other countries that are in the Bay of South China Sea, because US act as a security blanket to them, not just economically but in
Right.
defensial powers also, right? So it's first thing that is very important to note, and another thing is that even though US is backing them in the favor of the China, whether in the form of economically, military, or anything, but we cannot totally depend on USA also, especially in the recent time when due to the COVID-19, every country is having a backlash in the form of economical terms. So in that terms, China or the neighboring countries cannot totally depend on the uh, USA for the backing, right? So they
Right.
also need to have a strong assert with their neighboring countries also, who have a strong ground in the geopolitical scenario, along with the US. So in that
Right.
sense, then they have to come together and combat the issue of the China. And in that issue, countries like India and other countries like Sri Lanka and nearby regions can help them to dedicate the issue in a more political and legalized way, and
Right.
help them in backing the issue against the China, right?
Right.
So this is how the political issue of the China and USA forms in the political domain.
Right. Thank you so much, Anmol and Mandeep. We Before we end this discussion, we'll take a few questions. We'll open the floor for questions right now. So we have a few questions over here. The first one is by Abhishek Ranjan sir. He asks, what should be India's approach to South China Sea disputes?
Yeah, I guess it's a very important question, and there is another question from Mr. Bhavdeep Modi that India stated officially for the first time that it rejects Chinese claims over the South China Sea, which is quite correct, and said there should be freedom of navigation in the water. Till now, India had never spoken against China on this issue. What could be the motivating factor?
Yeah.
So these both are, I guess, India-centric questions, India's approach or this India sudden shift. I guess it's very right, and we really briefly touched upon it. US also did this first and for the first time actually published an official press release. I guess there are.
Right.
I guess it will be too naive of me to say that the recent India and China standoff is the only motivating factor that has made India do taken this decision, that has forced India to take this decision. No, see, we need to understand again when we're talking about maritime, we have multiple stakeholders within the country and outside the country. We have the co-fishing industry, we have the oil industry, we have the scientific industry, we have the maritime navy, coastal guards. So all of them are fighting or preserving their maritime power at different fronts. They are fighting their battles at different levels. So it's never that simple that suddenly an aggression between India and China happened on Gulf, and suddenly now India is against China in South China Sea.
Yeah.
So, to the best of my knowledge, I guess the best way to approach or tackle this issue would be to understand that there have been several factors over a period of time which have nurtured, aggravated, and now perhaps they are showing their implications. China has showed a lot of its cards on different platforms. So one
Right.
needs to keep those platforms in mind, not just the border dispute. It is the trade war, as you mentioned, and it is the China. It's the news of discrimination coming from other part of the region. But more importantly, I guess it has something to do with India and its influence in the South China Sea as well as the Indo-Pacific, because India, I guess, now realizes that India needs to show solidarity to its Asian partners and take a actual stand. Because without that, without actually showing, say, keenness to change or a concrete will to change and support its partners, then it would be just diplomatic gunshots being exchanged between each other. Wouldn't be more than that. So I guess we have to see how India tackles, but I guess it's a bold move and a much appreciative mood in terms of foreign policy to finally give a stand on the South China Sea, and it's much needed, I guess.
Very well, Mandeep. We have another question by Mitrajit Biswas, and I think Red Lantern has also asked a similar question. I think I'm going to read out both of them. So Mitraj says, how can Quad play a role in the South China Sea dispute? Red Lantern Analytica says US has declared South China Sea claims as unlawful. What does it mean in terms of the US-China relations? Future implications over the region and the role of Quad within the area. Any one of you could take the stage.
Sorry,
So
Sheetal,
I
can you please repeat the question for once?
sure.
Yeah, yes. The question is, how can Quad play a role in the South China Sea dispute? What does it mean in terms of US China relations, future implications over the region, and the role of Quad within the area?
Okay.
I guess I guess for our viewers, another question, US China, so quite similar question. I guess for our viewers, we first must tell what is Quad. Quad is quadrilateral security, that is a sort of pact between US, China, US, India, Japan, and Australia. Quadrilateral security angle, and it's a sort of semi-military and diplomatic exercises in the South China Sea, which I guess started in 2006 or 7 as a response against in China's growing economic and military activities. So
Right.
Quad again. So there are a lot of platforms where India is actually there diplomatically, of which we not are really familiar or hear of a lot. That is Asian Quad, and Quad is specifically maritime domain, so it's more important. And perhaps but Quad is strictly restricted to military activities. So, will India send its naval ships in South China Sea under Quad? Yes, it does certain exercises. It is still doing certain exercises, but that is mostly done by US and then Japan. India, per se, militarily does not play a huge role in South China Sea. So I don't think so that will increase as of now. There is no reason. There does not seem to be any concrete reason for military activities to increase. But I guess yes, diplomatically, Quad can work a lot, and these countries can come together. US has US and India have already done it. So, and Japan is already has always been very vocal about South China Sea, and now Vietnam is also very vocal. So, I guess these alliances will only help. But coming back again, military, I don't think so. Indian activities will increase as of now.
Right. There's another question by Aditya Kumar. He says US has declared China's South China Sea claims as unlawful. How does it affect the US-China relations?
I guess we have covered this fairly
Correct.
more or
Aditya
less.
has pointed.
Yeah, I think we've
Uh,
covered this.
yeah.
Aditya has correctly pointed out that the USA has said that there is no claim over the South China Sea issue. China don't hold that issue claim on the South China Sea, and in that regard, China also backfired and say that it will move out from the uh, UNELCO declaration that he signed from with the USA uh,
Right.
on the terms of the bilateral relationship with the maritime issues, right? So he says that it will back out, and China will act independently in the region of the South China Sea, in a similar way like USA has a right over the South China Sea and act independently under the law, under the jurisdiction of the UNELCO, because UNELCO is designed by the UN, and that's why USA holds the right of the jurisdiction that USA formed. So in that regard, even though Philippines, China, Vietnam, and Malaysia, these are the major regions in the South China region. They don't hold a claim over the South China Sea, and they can't hold their activities in the South China Sea without the permission of UNELCO, but USA can do. On the same claim, China said that it will move out from the UNELCO, and now they have it. It have its power in a similar way that USA has hold over the South China Sea, and it will be independent and autonomous body in that regard. So there will that's how it will affect. Also, if we talk about the China's position in the international relation in terms of the US-China relation, then we can see easily say that it will affect its position in the international relations, because it's not many countries are very happy with how China is playing right now, or otherwise also in the past with the resources that he holds strongly holds in his hand when it comes to the South China Sea, whether it's oiling or gas resources, that is a pool that South China Sea actually is a pool of. So it will strongly affect its position in the international relation if it moves out of the uh, USA and goes against to the USA will, or the other neighboring countries will. So that's how it will affect the US-China relationships.
Thank you so much, Anmol. I think that was very relevant. Thank you so much, Mandeep and Anmol, for being here today. It was very insightful, and
Thank
we hope to
you.
have you with us again. And with this, we sign off today's session.
Thank you, Sheeta.